Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Leffler,
And I'm Dan Leffler here with Being with Grief.
and this is a call to introduce you to our theme for August for our webinar, Changing the Conversation Around Grief.
The work is an offshoot of our experience that happened over 20 years ago when we lost our teenage daughter in a car accident. And we felt that it was important to begin having conversations. And it wasn't something that we did immediately, but it was something that we found very useful. And changing the conversation around grief introduces some of the ideas and topics that you can use when you're facing a difficult situation.
Because let's face it, none of us likes to talk about grief or the uncomfortable feelings that arise with grief. And yet we found in our own grief journeys and in our work with each of our individual clients that it's only when we step into the grief and begin the grieving process, which is an action step. That the grieving is an action, and by taking that action, we don't stay stuck in a place that doesn't serve us. So we began our series in March. And so this is our 6th month anniversary. This is our 6th topic. And we'll tell you a little bit later how you can access the previous recordings. But our topic for our August webinar is the myths of grief.
And you may wonder just exactly what we mean when we say myths around grief. Myths are stories that are told over and over again. And in the case of grief, it is the stories and lessons that we learn from our parents and from people that we have observed going through a difficult situation. Some of the myths that we have through our training and through our experience have come to recognize are things like being strong or keeping busy with life's activities after something tragic has happened. Another one is time heals all wounds, and it's really not time that does anything for you. It's what you do with that time.
Also, isolating yourself, grieving alone. We think we have to do everything alone, especially when we're faced with such when we're in such a devastating time. We're told to not feel bad. Don't feel that way. Or we're told to replace the loss. And this, I've heard, I had a client who had a baby that died, and she had people tell her that, well, at least you can have other children. And those are not helpful when you've gone through such a devastating loss, or even a pet. You may not be ready to get a new dog or cat. And even if you do, the next pet that you get will never ever replace the one that died. So all myths have a kernel of truth. And it's when it goes beyond that we that we can get stuck in these myths. And we mentioned all of them today. We're going to talk briefly about a few of them. And then in our webinar on August 9th, we will go much deeper into all of them and give you examples from our own experience, as well as how do you unravel those griefs? How do you not stay stuck in that stay strong?
Yeah, and that was one of the experiences that I had. I felt as man in the relationship, that I had to shoulder the burden and stay strong and take care of things, even though on the inside I was heartbroken. You know, I had lost my daughter, and um, I felt that I couldn't show that to anyone, and I had to, you know, carry that burden and um, you know, be there for the rest of the family and our friends who were also grieving her loss.
And also you felt you needed to do that at work because you had a job to do to provide for us.
Well, and that's another one of the myths, is keeping busy. Um, Rather than take the time that I needed to begin the grief process, I almost immediately went back to work. I was in the middle of a job. I had responsibilities as the project manager to uh, make sure that production and budgets and schedules were being kept. And I pushed everything that I was feeling down into um, what I've come to call my ammo box, um, and compartmentalizing all of the energy until that energy needed to be released. Because if it didn't release, like an ammo box, it could have exploded.
Yeah, and it could have exploded by affecting your health because feelings repressed have to come out in the body somehow. The other thing about keeping busy is that when you're busy all the time, you don't have the time and the space for the feelings to come up. It's a way of repressing the feelings. All of these are a way of repressing the feelings, but I think it's very easy illustrated. You can understand really clearly that when you're keeping busy, you don't have time for anything else. And even if you're not talking about grief, if you're keeping busy all the time, that's when you begin to feel uh, burnt out, and you need to take care of yourself. And so those are some of the things we'll be sharing. How do you take care of yourself when you're grieving? Um, how do you slow down without completely feeling like you're gonna I used to feel like I was gonna be annihilated if I allowed myself to feel the strength of the feelings that were coming in. And what happens is that when we don't feel our feelings, they get louder and more intense to get our attention. So when we begin to slow down and pay attention to them, they calm down a little bit.
And lets you pick up um, the pieces that you may have been holding back. Uh, and as I said, you know, for me, it was compartmentalizing, you know, all of my feelings so that I couldn't share with you.
Right.
I, you know, repressed that. I was afraid to talk about my feelings because I would lose control.
Right.
And
Right.
that's another one that I've seen people struggle with, is not wanting to lose control.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with uh, feeling that way,
Right.
especially when it's such a raw and emotional time.
Right. And when we feel that way, we tend to isolate. We think that we can grieve alone. We can, as you said, shoulder the burden, stay strong. And that's one of the things that I did. I completely isolated myself from everyone, including Dan and my son. My son was away at college, so it wasn't like I was neglecting him. Um, but I wanted to just stay in bed, and I didn't want to take a shower. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I was always really I don't know if I've ever even told you this, but I was always really shocked when someone looked at me and couldn't tell just by looking at me that I had gone through such a devastating event. Um, so I didn't show it on my face. I was stoic, which is another way of being strong, and I wanted to do it all by myself, and that didn't work either. So
And it really wasn't until we reached the point where we got further along in our grief process,
Yeah.
where we could begin to share that burden with each other.
Right, right.
And
We each had to go through our grief journey on our own for 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 several years. It wasn't a quick thing.
well, yeah, and we began that process, and to call grief a process or an action step may sound foreign to a um, someone in the middle of their grieving process, but
Yeah,
it is, and there are things and positive steps that can be done uh, to help you become aware of um, what you're feeling, then to try to align yourself in a way that um, gives you hope for something better than where you are, what you're suffering with, because you reach a point where the pain um, isn't serving you and
right,
you have to let it go.
right. And I did a podcast interview today, and the interviewer asked me a really interesting question. She said, "You've shared with the audience that you've been on your grief journey for over 20 years, and you've talked about living a life filled with meaning, purpose, and joy." She said to me, "I'm wondering though, are there times when you still grieve? Is grief still a part of your life?" And my answer is absolutely yes, because it is that process. And I I will never, I can't wrap my head around the fact that my daughter is not here. And yet my heart can hold it, and I can make space to hold it. So yes, I still feel uh, painful feelings, especially around um, milestone days, the anniversary of her death, or holidays, or birthdays, or if I hear a song that reminds me of her, I can be crying in a minute. And we teach the skills to be able to meet that grief. We often don't think that we need skills to meet grief because it's not something that we've been taught. We've
Right.
been taught to get over it. And how long does it take you to get over it? I'm not over the death of my daughter after almost, it's coming up on 22 years now. I'm not over that, but I do have the skills to meet it.
And that's an interesting point too, because the grief is different now.
Right,
It,
right,
it has modified over time to be reflections on the things that might have been. And one of the things that the grief recovery method, the method that I use when I'm working with clients, is grief is the uncommunicated messages that we had hoped we would have been able to communicate. Um, a lot of the pain and suffering that comes from loss is associated with those very deeply felt feelings, the things
right,
that you wish could have been more, better, or different.
right.
And there'll be more discussion of that
Yeah.
in our seminar.
So let's tell you how you can be a part of our monthly webinar. Our monthly webinar is a membership, a Being with Grief membership. And the way that it works is the first 3 months is $45, and then it's $20 after that. What you get for that is all the videos. Like if you join now, you will have the first 5 months of videos that are there for you to see. We also include some writing prompts based upon the month's topic. And I'm in the process of putting all of the webinars and things that we have done are also on the site. So even though those are available at other places without cost, you will have them all in one place so that you can listen to webinars on specific topics in the membership portal. So it's $45 for the first 3 months, then it renews at $20 a month, and you will have access to all videos as long as you remain a member. We also have a private Facebook group where we have conversations in between time during the month about these topics or any other topics that you would like to discuss.
Exactly. And we're always available through messaging or email to help you in any place that you may be stuck.
Yeah. We really are creating a community, and it's a community who is not afraid to talk about grief or to talk about, this was my experience of grief, what was yours? And there's no right or wrong way to grieve.
Especially important, and you know, as a couple, the statistics are overwhelming that when a couple have experienced the death of a child, that that marriage is at risk.
Right.
And we want to help individuals, couples who are facing these kinds of situations by sharing our experience and changing the conversation around grief.
So we will put a link for you to register for our webinar in the comments. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. You can message us or email us. We'll put our email addresses on there as well. And we really welcome you into the conversation. Let us know if there's anything that you would like to hear about. You'll see all the topics for the past topics and the topics for the remainder of this year in the document that opens up the registration form.
And check out our website,
Yeah.
beingwithgrief.com. It'll give you more information about who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And we look forward to engaging with you in conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you on the other side.